Ma shlomchem? How are you? I know that's a weighty question right now. At first blush, it seems pretty simple, something we're asked multiple times a day. Our natural, socially conditioned response is to reply with generic pleasantries like we do when bumping into an acquaintance at the grocery store. How are you? Great, so nice to see you. Nobody expects a long conversation, just to politely continue on through the produce section. But it's more than just a simple inquiry. I'm sure we've all had moments in the past year when someone asked us, "How are you?" and couldn't even begin to formulate a pleasant reply, let alone an honest response. The complexity of this question, Ma shlomcha, ma shlomech, how are you, is felt deeply by anyone trying to answer. You can even hear the word shalom in there. Are you at peace? Are you whole? Are you together in one piece? How can one possibly respond? Now, Israeli poets over the last 100 years or so have tried to answer that same question with the gifts of their emotional command of the Hebrew language. And from three of these poets, I want to share a framework today to help us as we reflect more deeply about what can be found in the dissonance, the discomfort, when it is hard to respond. The first is a poem from the poetess Zelda. She was one of the most beloved Israeli poets of the 20th century. You might know her well-known poem, L'chol ish yesh shem, every person has a name. She also wrote many love poems, one of which is titled Shlomi, which means my peace. It seems to be an answer, though, to that question, Ma shlomech, how are you? She writes, Shlomi kashur bechut el shlomcha. My well-being is tied by a thread to your well-being. Or in other words, I am doing as well as you are doing, my beloved. Here she helps us to see how the well-being of one person is so tightly connected to the state of another. One of the most painful aspects of the last year is that many of us experienced an untethering from friends, acquaintances, co-workers, neighbors. We began to understand that many people don't perceive Jewish pain as real. The loneliness of this moment feels alienating for so many because while we are hurting and suffering, there is a need to be seen and recognized by others. My colleague, Rabbi Sharon Brous from Los Angeles, recently published a book called The Amen Effect. It's about how to rebuild society amidst so much alienation. She wrote the book prior to October 7th, but it resonates so deeply when we consider how we are doing spiritually and in our relationships. In the book, she teaches a text from the ancient rabbinic work, the Mishnah, about the annual pilgrimages that took place when the temple in Jerusalem stood. The Mishnah, in its exceptional detail, describes the flow of the foot traffic to know about the logistics of getting people in and out of the temple in an orderly fashion. It's kind of like Kol Nidre services here, I think. The way it's described in the Mishnah, hundreds of thousands of Jews ascended to the Temple Mount, entered the courtyard, and turned to the right, and then circled and exited to the left. But some people entered and veered to the left, and they would go the other way. And they would encounter people, and people would ask them, "Why are you going the wrong way?" And they might say, "Because I am bereaved," to which the other would offer words of comfort. Rabbi Brous teaches, when you are suffering, you root your suffering in a context of care. Even as you step into the community, you don't pretend you're okay, you're not okay, which will be obvious to anyone who looks at you. You wear your troubles on the outside. The whole world moves seamlessly in one direction and you in another. And even still, you trust that you will not be marginalized, mocked, misunderstood. There is a stranger coming toward you, making her way against the flow of the crowd. You want to avert your eyes like you are on some New York City subway platform, but you are not allowed to. You stop and greet her with a simple, open-hearted question. What's your story, and why does your heart ache? And the grief-stricken person answers, I am broken. You offer words of comfort. I see you, you say. You are not alone. Shlomi kashur bechut el shlomcha. My well-being is tied by a thread to yours. It's so essential, isn't it, to have a friend who can offer you this precious gesture of recognition, and for each one of us to be a friend to others when they need to be seen. If you are feeling alone this Yom Kippur, please know you have community here. We hope to see more and more of you and want to help you connect more deeply in this community. Come for the beautiful Shabbat community that is so special here at Temple Sholom. Find connections through our men's club sisterhood, Kihilatenu, Eastside Jews, Shalom Shishim. The opportunities are plentiful. Right now, we all need friends who recognize our Jewish heartache. Another Israeli poet who attempted to answer that question, Ma shlomcha, how are you, was Chaim Guri, one of the great poets of Israeli history. He penned one of his last poems in 2018 when he was over 90 years old. In a stanza from this poem, he wrote, Ma shlomcha, how are you? They ask me on the street. All kinds of people. Shlomi keshlom ami. I am as my people are. I respond, and then they heave a small sigh like sharers of a troubled time. Many Israelis adopted this line of Chaim Guri during the past year in answering Ma shlomcha, ma shlomech on the street. Shlomi keshlom ami, I am as my people are. We have felt this answer too. We feel these immeasurable bonds of peoplehood. We have learned this past year that the well-being of any one of us as an individual Jew is connected to the well-being of all of us. In many ways, the connections between Jews of the diaspora and the Jews of Israel have never felt stronger. We feel ourselves tethered to one another in a shared future, concerned about each other's well-being. But the more I thought about this poem, I felt a little bit of alienation that echoes in that refrain, Shlomi keshlom ami. I am as my people are, or more precisely, I am as my nation is. Hearing these words as a Canadian Jew hits in a totally different way. Some of you know my family and I took the oath of Canadian citizenship this past February. It was a very meaningful moment for us, and next week I will vote in my first election. But this week, I saw a video of a Canadian flag being burned on the steps of the Vancouver Art Gallery at a rally in support of Hamas's attacks of October 7th. There is horrible anti-Semitic graffiti around the city. Canadian classrooms, universities, union halls have become hostile places to be publicly Jewish. There seems to be a lack of enforcement of rules or upholding of systems designed to ensure safety and environments free from hate. My well-being, our well-being, is tied to the well-being of two nations, Israel and Canada. Yet no matter how painful, we do not give up and we hold on to hope. The Israeli author David Grossman wrote of hope being like a sort of an anchor cast from a stifled, desperate existence toward a better, freer future. When the anchor is cast, it takes hold of the future, and human beings, sometimes an entire society, begin to pull themselves toward it. Hope is that thread that we continue to hold on to during the darkest moments of our lives and in our world. It is the common thread that we as a Jewish people hold on to ever so tightly when nothing is promised, nothing is guaranteed. We can do the same today as both Jews and Canadians. When we are in need of strength, we can recognize that we are part of something so much greater than our own individual selves. Pulling ourselves toward the future is an act of hope we take every day as Canadian Jews for the sake of both of our nations. The final poet I want to introduce you to is a contemporary Israeli poet named Lital Kaplan. In a recent poem, she creatively describes how the entire enterprise of small talk in Hebrew has changed after October 7th. She wrote a poem titled, "Home Front Command's New Regulations for Small Talk." It describes the updated answer to what she calls the rude question, "Ma shlomcha," how are you? Instead of the standard response, "Etzli hakol beseder," I'm fine, in fact, it is required to say, "Hakol besedek," everything's cracked. And the truthful ones will answer, "Hakol beshever," everything is shattered. Hakol beshever, everything is shattered. We are all shattered. Everything is shattered and we are left brokenhearted, just as our broader sense of our national peoplehood self is of brokenness. As individuals, too, we experience an alienation from our own sense of self. Feeling broken is not a new post-October 7th emotion of the human condition. Many of us in this room have hearts that are shattered or were once shattered, now healing, but with scars from those breaks. And collectively, as a people, we have known brokenness in generations of old. We have so many examples, actually, of sacred brokenness in our Jewish tradition. Sometimes we actually break things on purpose to remind ourselves of the brokenness of the past, the fragility of the present, or the uncertainty of the future. Think about breaking the afikomen in the Passover Seder, or the smashing of the glass under the chuppah. And we also have rabbinic tales of brokenness. But these are not solely of destruction, but growth. I want us to think about the most significant shattering in the whole Torah, the shattering of the tablets of the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai that Moses smashed at the base of the mountain. But when he went back up and carved a second set of tablets and placed them in the ark for the Israelites to carry with them, it was not only the new second set that was placed in that ark. Our tradition says that the shattered first set of tablets were also placed in the ark and carried by our ancestors. It's interesting that it was only when Moses brought down the second set of tablets that his face was described as being radiant. As I learned in an insight from my colleague, Rabbi Chaim Schaffner, it was an act of tshuva, making whole that which had been broken, that produced for Moses a more intimate relationship with God, as symbolized by those rays coming from his face. In facing our brokenness, we do not lose our former broken selves. We attempt to do tshuva, to mend what is shattered, but we carry all of these parts of ourselves, the broken and the whole, into the future. Today, Yom Kippur, is a day to remember the broken things and to think about what has become of them. A friendship that we have allowed to slip through our fingers, the dream we have neglected and no longer pursue, or the broken heart. Today we give some thought to those shattered things that really inevitably are part of all of our lives. Being able to give voice to that brokenness is a sign of spiritual and emotional honesty. And with the gift of time, I do believe we can learn from, grow from, and even extract a blessing from brokenness. One of the most beautiful verses in the book of Psalms addresses this yearning for the blessing of the healing of a broken heart. Harofeh lishvurei lev, healer of the brokenhearted, binder of our wounds, you are the counter of uncountable stars, and you call each one by name. The Israeli pop singer Hanan Ben Ari wrote a song reflecting the language of this psalm called Shvurei Lev. And in a moment, Cantor Cohen will sing it for us. The lyrics ask, who knows every pain, who repairs every broken heart? And who will heal my heart for whom I am longing, like a sea that has no shore? Just tell me who will embrace me and ensure that I will not give up in the end. In a world in which there seems to be no shore to anchor to, the song is a heartfelt prayer for healing and strength in times of brokenness. Though Hanan Ben Ari wrote it a few years ago, it has been particularly embraced this year by Israelis as a sort of prayer cast out across the radio waves to find solace in the face of the brokenness of our time. My prayer this Yom Kippur, may God inspire our hearts, the broken ones and the whole ones, to take care of one another, to have hope for the well-being of our nations, and to engage in acts of tshuva that can lead us to heal the brokenhearted. Gemar Chatima Tova.
יודע כל כאב, מי רופא לי שבורי לב, יוצר אור וחושך, עושה שלום ומלחמה, מי יושב על כיסא דין, מתכסה ברחמים, מוחל וסולח, מביט